Hello, my name is Jack Heineke, and today's devotional comes from the book of Hebrews, chapter 6, verses 18 through 19. So that by two unchangeable things, His promise and His oath, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to Him for refuge would have strong encouragement and indwelling strength to hold tightly to the hope set before us. This hope, this confident assurance, we have as an anchor of the soul. It cannot slip and it cannot break down under whatever pressure bears upon it. A safe and steadfast hope that enters within the veil of the heavenly temple, that most holy place in which the very presence of God dwells. That comes from the Amplified Version. That's why there's more words in these verses than in most of the other translations that we typically use. I like the Amplified Version because I like seeing these deeper messages and meanings that are things that are actually being said in the Bible. It kind of opens it up a little bit more and just makes it come more alive for me personally. Now, hope is something I would not want to exist without. Hope is a pretty important aspect of our lives, and especially of our Christian lives. I'm not sure what your life has been like and where you've been in regards to hope is concerned, but I have been in a place in my mind, in my life, where I was without hope. And I can go into greater detail, but I will save that for another devotional one day when I talk about my witness, because that time had a lot to do with my becoming a Christian eventually. But that time was a very dark, extremely difficult, painful time. And I literally had no hope within me at all to change the situations that were going on in my life or to change my life. I could not see past anything that was going on at that time that actually gave me hope that things could get better. I was 33 years old when this happened, and I literally had come to the conclusion that, well, if this is as good as life is going to get, and it sure appears that this is as good as it's going to get, then honestly, what's the point of living, quite frankly? And when my mind reached that level of despair, and it was a nonstop, unrelenting assault of despair that I could not shake, and I had no hope for, the only real solution that my mind came up with was to take my life. I never made a serious attempt to take my life, but I was certainly contemplating it because I had reached such a level of despair and hopelessness that the only way that I saw out was to end my life. That's a horrible place for a person to be. And that describes where a lot of people in our world are right now today. And that certainly described me as a person who had no faith, no trust, no relationship with God, who knew very, very little about the actual Bible and what it really said and what its true message actually was. In fact, when I finally started reading the Bible, I was stunned. I was amazed at what I found in there that I did not believe was even in there before I began to read it. And that process began to change me and alter me, and it gave me something very important that I hadn't had, and that was hope. And ever since then, that hope has always been a part of my life. It hasn't left me, even in some of my darkest moments since then, because once you encounter that hope of God that comes from God, not from ourselves and not from our fellow man, it can't come from good intentions or good vibes being sent to you. Honestly, in my life, it only came from God. And it did not come from people. It came from God. And so this hope that's being discussed in these verses here in the book of Hebrews, this is a hope that is based on God's character of Him fulfilling His promises and His oath, His covenant, His testament. The word Old Testament and New Testament actually means Old Covenant, New Covenant. And God made these promises in His covenant in the Old Testament to Abraham that I will build a nation that will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, and Mr. Old Abraham and his old wife Sarah. And of course, if God says this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. And through Abraham and Sarah came the nation of Israel. That Abraham and his wife Sarah were, in a sense, the very first Israelites, because there was no nation of Israel before them. And God fulfilled his promise and created the nation of Israel. Now there's a lot of other promises that God has for us as well. But this is based on his character, and it simply says in here as well that in God's character that God cannot lie. Because if God could lie, as Oswald Chambers wrote in the book More Than a Carpenter, if God went against his own character, then he wouldn't be God, would he? God cannot lie. God gets a bad rap for lots of things that happen in our world, but one of the things he cannot get a bad rap for, because no one has any evidence, is that God lies. And if God gives us hope and a faith, then God's going to follow through with what he says he's going to do with that hope and that faith. So when we are faced with trials, tribulations, suffering, and perhaps even death, we find our refuge in this hope of God. That refuge cannot be found anywhere else on this earth. No amount of money can buy it. You can't purchase it off of Amazon. Doesn't matter how educated you are, doesn't matter how many degrees you have or how much prestige or power you may think you have. None of these things can give you this hope. There's no other hope like this. It's a substantial, solid, definite hope. It's not pie-in-the-sky hope. It's not belief in an imaginary man. It just exists in the sky, as many people mistakenly think that's what we believe in. We don't believe in something that's imaginary. For us, for myself, and for many others, God is more real than what we find in our existence here on this earth, because God is eternal. And he's more real than anything else I've ever encountered, quite frankly. This hope anchors the soul in a world of swirly, crazy, insane storms. All you have to do is look at today's news and you'll see one storm after the other. And there are all these threats of storms all the time. I see one threat after the other of how we're going to not have food and how we're not going to have all these different things. And that may well happen. I can't predict the future. I don't know. But I do know so far from many of the threats that I've seen posted online and on YouTube videos, actually coming from, I want to believe that they're well-meaning Christians, but they predict all kinds of nonsense that just doesn't come true. Not yet anyway. And I'm not saying that these things won't happen, because I can't predict the future. But I can't put my faith and trust in these predictions that come from people. I have to put my faith and trust in God alone. I can't place any confidence in positive thoughts or any of our attempts to send man-made hope, for it cannot hold up against these storms. Man-made hope will crumble and fall at the slightest wind that comes upon it. It folds against the least amount of pressure because it's entirely man-made. But God's hope that he gives those who believe enters into and is from the Holy of Holies. Now, if you don't know what the Holy of Holies is, you find that in the Old Testament. It was the dwelling place of God within the tabernacle. It was the dwelling place of God within the temple. It was the dwelling place of God out in the middle of a desert with a guy named Moses who went up on a mountain to encounter God. And he encountered God absolutely on that place. It is a sacred place that the Israelites recognized as the earthly dwelling place of God. And what it says here is all we have to do is open our eyes to see that man's best intentions cannot be holy. That holiness is an attribute, just like how God cannot lie. Holiness is an attribute that belongs solely to God. Now, we are to be holy as God is holy. That's an instruction. And that holiness, though, can only come through God. It cannot come through man. This is why this hope is important. And that's why this hope is so important for us to actually have a hold of in our lives, because there are storms going on all around us, and sometimes there are storms going on within us. And the only thing that's ever rescued me has been God. God working through people, God working through members of the church that I attend, people loving me, loving my kids, and showing us that there's a much better way. And we share a lot of things in common as believers. One of them is we just love to be around each other. We love to serve God at that church. And we have that love of God in common within us, but we also all share that same hope. All you got to do is spend a little bit of time with someone at that church, and you'll hear that hope in there. And they may actually never use that word hope, but you'll find it in these people. And I've been so blessed and fortunate to be a part of that particular part of the body, that particular family of the body. I pray that you have that hope in your life, and if you don't, I would pray with you for you to find that hope. If you have any prayer requests, you can leave that in the comments section. Anything that you need help with, please put in the comments section, because it's just not myself that's involved in putting these videos across, but you have a team of people that would be willing to pray for you and pray with you if we need to. That would be fine as well. But we ask that you share this with your friends on Facebook or any other social media, that if these messages touch you and reach you, we would like to touch and reach as many people as we can. We're not into this for fame or fortune. We're into this to further the kingdom of God, to assist God's people in developing a closer walk with God, to hope that they would have this hope that we're discussing right here today. Hope is vitally important. As I said earlier, I know what it's like to not have this hope. I never, ever want to experience that, and I believe that I never will experience that level of hopelessness ever again. That God is always there with His hope every time, even when death occurs, when our death occurs, on the other side of that veil, we will see Him face to face, it says. It says we will go to a place that He prepared for us personally. That gives me a hope that's far beyond anything that any human could have ever possibly given me. So I pray that you have an awesomely blessed day today.